Louisiana's Way Home by Kate D. Camilla. Chapter 24. I woke up in Reverend Obertask's office. I was on the floor, and my head was on a pillow made out of a scratchy tweed jacket. Reverend Obertask was sitting at his desk staring down at me. "Ah," he said, "there you are." "Here I am," I said. "You fainted." The sun was shining in through Reverend Obertask's window and landing right on his head so that he looked like a walrus in a religious painting. Not that I have ever seen a walrus in a religious painting. Camels, yes, and also horses, and sometimes dogs, and angels, of course. There are always angels in religious paintings. You don't see that many angels in real life, though. Reverend Obertask smiled at me. "Mourners faint at funerals," he said. "It's a common occurrence. But you are the first musician I've ever known to faint mid-song. Miss Lulu is supremely agitated, of course. She likes for things to go a certain way, a predictable way." Well, I understood that feeling. Not that I have ever experienced things going a predictable way. I closed my eyes. I saw Granny smiling with all her teeth. I saw Mrs. Ivy waving the bill. I saw Dr. Fox in his bloody jacket. And then I saw Clarence's wings, dark and shiny, beating out the rhythm of a heart. I opened my eyes and looked at Reverend Obertask. "Was there a crow in church?" "Not to my knowledge." "Oh, what about a dentist? Did you see a dentist?" "I did not," said Reverend Obertask, "although I must say that they are a little more difficult to identify at a glance." "Did you see anyone wearing a fur coat?" "No crows, no dentists, no fur coats," said Reverend Obertask. He smiled again at me. I said, "I don't know who I am. I only know that I am not who I thought I was." Reverend Obertask nodded his big head. "That is a problem we all face sooner or later, I suppose." From out in the church there came the crashing sound of Miss Lulu on the organ. Reverend Obertask stood up. "Clearly Miss Lulu is becoming impatient," he said. "There is still a funeral to run. Why don't you rest? I'll drive you home when this is all over. We can talk things through." I closed my eyes. Reverend Obertask the Walrus was going to drive me home. I wondered where that was. Home. "Provisions have been made." That is what the Granny Mirage had said to me. Or that was what I had heard. And then before I knew it, I was asleep because I was just so very, very tired. Reverend Obertask took me to the Allens' house. You could smell the cake baking when we were still out in the woods, before the pink house ever came into view. Reverend Obertask knocked on the back door, and Betty Allen opened it and said, "What in the world?" She opened her arms to me, and I walked right into them. Betty Allen held me tight for a minute, and then she let go. "There was a little mishap at the funeral," said Reverend Obertask. "My, but it smells wonderful in here." Betty Allen blushed. "I am the official baker for the carnival," she said. "Yes, indeed," said Reverend Obertask. "That is why it's called the world-famous Betty Allen Cake Raffle. What particular cake am I smelling now?" Excuse me. "That is my pound cake," said Betty Allen. "It is not a fancy cake, but it is very, very good. It is my great-grandmother's recipe." "It smells divine," said Reverend Obertask. "I would like to win a pound cake in the world-famous Betty Allen cake raffle," I said. "Oh, honey," said Betty Allen. "How would you feel about Mrs. Allen and myself having a private word?" said Reverend Obertask to me. "Burke should be home from school any minute now," said Miss Betty Allen. "You should wait for him outside." I went out the back door and stood in the carport and listened to Reverend Obertask say, "I am very worried about this child." And Betty Allen said back to him, "I am worried too." I could tell that the conversation between Reverend Obertask and Betty Allen was going to be extremely sad, and I just didn't think my heart could bear to listen. I walked away from them down to the end of the driveway. I stood and looked out into the woods. I whistled for Clarence the same way Burke did, 2 low whistles and then one high, but Clarence didn't come. I sat down on the ground. On the drive back from the funeral, I had told Reverend Obertask my story, or most of my story. I did not tell him that Granny was gone, because I did not want Reverend Obertask to contact the authorities. In any case, I started with Elf Ear, Nebraska, and the stage and the sundering that occurred there. I told him about the letter from the fake granny and how it told the story of a magician walking away from his daughter without saying anything to her at all, and also the story of the Louisiana five and dime in the dark alley and the flowered blanket and what was inside it, which was me. I told him about Dr. Fox pulling every last one of Granny's teeth and me lying to Mrs. Ivy about the bill. I told him about the good night sleep tight and how it had a vending machine in the vestibule and with everything you could ever want inside of it, and also how there was a stuffed alligator in the lobby who was very ferocious looking. I told him that there had been curtains with palm trees all over them in room 102 and how it was wrong for palm trees to be on curtains in Georgia. I told him that Bernice was holding my suitcase for ransom and that I would probably never see it again. I told him how I had asked Burke Allen for 1 bologna sandwich and he had given me 2. I told him that Betty Allen was making 17 cakes. 17! And that the grandfather Burke Allen had given me his bowl of ice cream with chocolate sauce and peanuts on top, and that he had held my hand while I ate it. I told him about Beverly and Raimy. I told him about Buddy, the one-eyed dog, and how the 3 of us had rescued him together. I told him about Archie, King of the Cats, and how once he found his way back to me. I told him about the time I almost drowned and that the Blue Fairy had shown up underwater, smiling at me and holding out her arms, and that part of me wanted to go with her deeper into the pond. I told him that the operator on the phone in his office had told me that there were no listings for Topinski and too many listings for Clark with an E and no Ramey Clark at all, and how could that be? And speaking of how things could be, I asked him again how anybody could leave a baby in an alley. How could that be? How could it? Reverend Obertask stared straight ahead at the road the whole time I was talking. And here was the surprising thing. He cried. I talked and he kept his eyes on the road, and I watched one tear and then another tear creep down his sad walrus face and disappear into his whiskers. When we got to the good night sleep tight, I said to Reverend Obertask, "I want to get my suitcase back from Bernice, and I want to go to the Allen's house because Granny is still unwell and needs to sleep a healthy sleep, a healing sleep." Reverend Obertask said, "Please wait here, Louisiana." He went into the motel office, and a few minutes later, he came walking out with my suitcase. The suitcase looked very small in his big hand. When he got back into the car, Reverend Obertask turned to me and said, "I want you to know something, Louisiana. We all at some point have to decide who we want to be in this world. It is a decision we make for ourselves. You are being forced to make this decision at an early age, but that does not mean that you cannot do it well and wisely. I believe you can. I have great faith in you. You decide. You decide who you are, Louisiana. Do you understand?" I told him that I did understand, even though I wasn't certain that I did. "And another thing," he said, "you will never understand why your parents left you in the alley. It is impossible to understand. But it may be necessary for you to forgive them for your own sake, without ever truly understanding what they did. Okay? His face was so serious and sad that I said, "Yes, Reverend Overtask, I understand, but I didn't understand. How could I forgive people who had never shown me any kindness? How could I forgive people who had left me behind without loving me at all?" And so it came to pass that I found myself sitting at the end of a long driveway in front of a pink house that smelled like cake, thinking about forgiveness and who I wanted to be in this world. Chapter 25. I sat there until Burke Allen came walking out of the woods with Clarence sitting on his shoulder. "Hey," said Burke. "Hey, Louisiana, guess what? I got the whole thing planned out. I know just where to go and what bus to get on and the whole thing." And just as he said that, I heard Reverend Overtask say my name. "Louisiana," he said. I turned and looked behind him, and lo and behold, I saw the walrus and the blue fairy standing together at the top of the driveway. And even though Pinocchio does not encounter a walrus on his journey, Reverend Overtask and Betty Allen standing there together looked like something out of Pinocchio's story come to life. Reverend Overtask waved at me, and then he came walking down the driveway and took hold of my hand. He said, "Thank you for talking with me, Louisiana." I said, "You are welcome." And then Betty Allen said my name. "Louisiana Elefante," she called out. "I wonder if you would like to come and help me bake the last cake, which is a marble cake." "Me?" I asked. "Yes, you, honey." Is a marble cake a cake with surprise marbles in it?" I said. "There's a recipe," said Betty Allen. "The two of us will follow it together." "Why don't you go on up there and help her?" said Reverend Overtask. "I'll get your suitcase out of the car." Clarence flapped his wings and took off from Burke's shoulder and flew away. Reverend Overtask let go of my hand. "Go on, Louisiana," said Burke. "I'll wait on you." The kitchen in the pink house was painted a bright yellow, and being in that room with Betty Allen was like standing inside the sun. "Now, what I'm going to have you do is measure out the flour and the baking powder and the salt, all the dry ingredients basically," said Betty Allen. I said, "I've never made any kind of cake before." "Never, ever?" said Betty Allen. "No," I said, "my granny does not believe in baking." Betty Allen put her hands on her hips. "Well, for heaven's sakes, what does she believe in?" That was a good question. I considered it. "Singing," I said finally. "She believes in me singing." Betty Allen nodded. "Reverend Overtask did say that you have a beautiful voice. Now, here's the flour and salt and what have you, and also a few bowls and measuring cups and spoons, and I will just put you to work on this counter over here." I measured the flour and the salt and the baking powder, and the whole time Betty Allen was standing at the counter opposite me, humming under her breath. It was warm in the kitchen, and the yellow walls were so bright, and Betty Allen's humming was so musical that I started to think that maybe things weren't as tragic as they seemed. Betty Allen said, "Maybe when we have baked this cake, we'll take a big old piece of it to your granny at the good night sleep tight." "That is not at all necessary," I said very, very quickly. "Your granny doesn't like cake?" asked Betty Allen. "Her teeth hurt too much to eat," I said. "It is very difficult to eat cake when you are toothless. The world in general becomes a difficult place without teeth." "Oh," said Betty Allen. "I see." She went back to humming. We put everything together into one big bowl, the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients, and mixed it all together with the electric mixer, and then poured half of it into a cake pan. "There," said Betty Allen. "Now we will add the cocoa to the rest of the batter and swirl it all around. That's the marbling part. Maybe you want to do that? She stood over me. She put her hands on my shoulders and said, just pour it on there and swirl. I poured. I swirled. That's right, said Betty Allen. Make it as swirly as you want. When I was done, Betty Allen kept her hands on my shoulders, and we both stared down at the cake. She said, Louisiana, you can trust me. You can tell me the truth. Is your granny gone? I didn't answer her. I couldn't answer her. I also couldn't keep myself from crying. And once I started crying, I couldn't stop. I stood there in the yellow kitchen in the pink house, and I cried and I cried. I cried because Granny was truly and forever gone, and somehow I knew that she was not coming back. I cried because I was alone. I cried because the curse was not my curse. I cried, and my tears of sadness and despair and hope and anger fell directly into the marble cake that had no marbles. Betty Allen said, we would be happy to help you try to find your granny, honey, but you can stay with us for as long as you need to. You can have a home with us if that's what you want. It was such a simple sentence. Why did it sound so beautiful and impossible? Think about it, said Betty Allen. I know Emma Stonehill over in Family Services. I could talk to her. Reverend Obertask could talk to her, too. We could find a way to make it work, honey. She picked up the cake pan and turned away from me and opened the oven door. And when the marble cake was inside the oven and the door was closed, Betty Allen clapped her hands together as if she had just performed a magic trick. Now, she said, run out there and look for Burke. I know he's waiting on you. And, honey, we would all love to have you stay here with us and be part of our family. But it is your decision entirely. It was my decision entirely. I went outside, and Bert was there. He looked at me, and my goodness, his eyes were bright. And it occurred to me that they were probably so bright because he had never had to ask himself who he was, or where he belonged, or who he wanted to be. He was Burke Allen, who was the son of Burke Allen, who was the son of Burke Allen, on, infinitely. Do you still want to go to Florida? Said Burke. I don't know, I told him, and I don't know what I want to do. And he nodded. He whistled for Clarence. And then Burke said, come on and follow me. Chapter 26. When I can't think on what I need to do, or when I need to solve a really hard problem, what I do is climb up high. Up to the top of that good night sign, said Burke. Well, I am not climbing up to the top of that sign, I said, because as I told you before, I am afraid of heights. We don't got to go to the top of the sign, said Burke. Just to the top of the tree. Setting in a tree and looking up can help you figure things out. Well, I didn't have any more strength to argue with him. And in addition, I didn't know who I was. For all I knew, I was somebody who was not afraid of heights. My goodness, it was possible. I followed Burke to the big live oak beside the goodnight sleep tight. He climbed up into the crook of it, and then he stood there and looked down at me. All you got to do is give me your hand, Louisiana. I'll go on ahead of you, and I'll keep holding out my hand to you, all right? Go ahead, I said. Clarence was sitting on a branch, watching both of us. This here is the first step, said Burke. This is where you start. Come on. You got to do the first part on your own. Grab hold of the tree. I walked closer to the tree. Clarence laughed. Grab hold of that branch right there, said Burke. I took hold of the branch. It was rough and warm. Good, said Burke. Now go on and pull yourself up just a bit. I pulled myself up. Burke smiled at me. He went up higher in the tree. Come on now, he said. He held out his hand. Well, I was off the ground and in that tree, and I just didn't think I was interested in going much farther. The person I used to call Granny had always told me I was overly cautious physically, and I suppose I was. But maybe I didn't have to be. Maybe it was like Reverend Obertask had said. I could decide who I wanted to be. Burke said, Louisiana, if you take my hand and come up higher, I will go and get you anything you want out of that old vending machine. And that is always the problem with me, isn't it? I cannot keep from wanting things. I want peanuts, I said. All right, said Burke. He stuck his hand out further. And an O. Henry bar. Okay, he said. 2 O. Henry bars. I'll get you everything you want, he said. I took Burke's hand. It felt rough and warm, the same as the tree branch. Come on, said Burke. I got hold of you. Put your foot down there. Don't look down. I put my foot where he told me to. I kept hold of his hand. I did not look down, and bit by bit we climbed to the top of the tree. It is a wondrous thing to be at the top of a tree, particularly when you have 2 O. Henry bars to eat and a bag of peanuts. When we got to the top, Burke left me and climbed back down to go to the vending machine. I stayed and held on to the branch. I looked down and guess what? I did not feel afraid. I truly did not. Maybe it was because Clarence was on the branch next to me, or maybe it was just because I was done with being afraid. Or who knows? Maybe I had never been afraid of heights to begin with. Maybe it was just one more lie that Granny had told me about myself. I don't know. But I do know that I ate both candy bars and all the peanuts. Burke and Clarence were beside me, and even though the light was fading, I was happy. The three of us watched together as the sky turned into a purple kind of blue. Look it, said Burke. You can see the stars now. It got darker, and the stars got brighter, and I still felt happy, so I started to sing. I sang a song about a sitting in a tree with a boy and a crow looking up at the stars. It was a happy song. I put no Henry bar into it, and also peanuts and a marble cake. I did not add curses or dark alleys. I put only happy things in the song, and it made me happy to sing it. Dang, said Burke when I was done. That's a good song. At least I knew that about myself. At least I knew I was somebody who could sing. That was something Granny had given me. She had given me a lot, I suppose. Look right there, I said to Burke. That's the Pinocchio constellation. Where? Said Burke. That one right there, see? That is the face, and that is the long snout of someone telling a lie. Shoot, Louisiana, said Burke. That constellation is called the Big Dipper. Grandpap showed me that one forever ago. See how it looks like a big old scoop? And that's the handle to it right there. It ain't a nose, it's a handle. And over there is the North Star. That's the one you want to look for when you're lost in the woods, because then you know what direction north is, and then you ain't lost anymore. Oh, I said. I stared up at the North Star. I could not imagine not being lost. We should probably head on back so they don't come looking for us, said Burke. You want me to help you with the climbing down? No, I said, I can do it. You go ahead of me and I'll follow you. All right, said Burke. Have you ever had marble cake? I asked Burke as we went down the tree. I have had all of them cakes that Mamma makes, he said. I have had every one of them. They're all good. Your mother figured out that Granny is gone, I said when we were both back on the ground. Burke turned to me. And she told me that I could stay with you. I said that I could live with your family. That means you ain't going to go back to Florida then? I don't know what I'm going to do, I said. Do you want me to stay with you? Burke shrugged. He said, I think it would be all right if you stayed. I think it would be great if you stayed. He shrugged again. But I ain't going to tell you what to do. I nodded. I said, Show me again which star is the North Star. Burke pointed. That one, right there. Thank you, I said. It seems like a good thing to know the star that can keep you from being lost in the world. Chapter 27. We all went to the carnival, me and Burke and Betty Allen and the father Burke and the grandfather Burke, and I still had not made up my mind whether I would stay or whether I would leave. I just could not decide. But the good news is that the world-famous Betty Allen cake raffle was set up on the lawn in front of the Lost Shepherd Church. The cakes were arranged end to end on a long table, and they were beautiful to behold. There was a large glass fishbowl on the table, too, and every time somebody bought a raffle ticket, Betty Allen ripped the ticket in half and put one half into the bowl and handed the other half back to the person who hoped to win a cake. The piano had been rolled out from the social hall, and Miss Lulu was playing what she might have thought was an appropriate cake raffling song. It occurred to me that no matter what I did, I could just not escape from Miss Lulu and her attempts at making music. It cost $1 for every ticket, and Burke Allen, the grandfather, gave me $5 so I could purchase 5 tickets because I really, really wanted to win a cake. I would buy them all, these cakes, Doodlebug, said Grandfather. I would buy you every last one of them. You don't even got to throw your tiny hat into the ring. All you got to do is say the word, and I will buy 'em all up for you. But I wanted to enter the raffle. I wanted to throw my tiny hat into the ring. I wanted to take my chances. Miss Lulu continued to play, pounding away at what sounded to me like cake raffle dirge, until all the tickets were sold, and then Betty Allen said, "We have 17 cakes, ladies and gentlemen, and I will call 17 winning numbers." People applauded, and I clapped too, and then I looked down at my tickets. Were they winning numbers? I could not tell. I studied them very carefully. Betty Allen cleared her throat. Miss Lulu played a dramatic piano roll. Betty Allen said, "The first number is 256. Well, I did not have number 256. I went through my 5 tickets several times just to make sure. A very large lady in a purple dress shouted, "That's me! That's me! I have won a cake!" And she moved up to the tables to select her cake while Miss Lulu played another dramatic roll on the piano, and everybody applauded. And then we started all over again. Betty Allen put her hand into the fishbowl. Miss Lulu played some piano, and then Betty Allen pulled out a ticket and called out a number, and it was not my number. Pretty soon we had made it through almost all the cakes. There was just one left, and it was the pineapple upside down cake. And even though I would have been very happy to win it, I have to say that the pineapple rings on the top of it seemed the tiniest bit desperate. There is something very sad about pineapple rings. I looked up at Grandfather Burke. He was studying me with a serious look on his face. And then I looked over at Betty Allen. She was holding the bowl with the numbers on it, and she was watching me too. I smiled at Betty Allen, and she smiled back at me. The light was shining off the fishbowl in a very beautiful way. Betty Allen put the bowl back on the table and reached her hand in and pulled out the last ticket. She did not once take her eyes off me. I thought, I have won! I have won the last cake! The fishbowl was all lit up with numbers and light. It really was a beautiful fishbowl. And then I remembered the little glass bowls that Betty Allen had used for the ice cream sundaes. I remembered sitting at the glass topped table with all of the Allens. I remembered Grandpa Burke sliding his bowl over to me and saying, "That's for you, Doodlebug. Take what is offered to you." And I knew what I wanted to do. I knew who I wanted to be. I wanted to be the person who sat at that table. I wanted to stay. Betty Allen cleared her throat. She called out the last winning number. And guess what? It was not my number. I did not win a cake, but I did not care. I was staying. Chapter 28. And so here I am, Granny, almost at the end of the story. Imagine how surprised I am to find that you are the one I am writing to. And speaking of surprise, you will not be surprised to learn that Reverend Overtask is better at dealing with telephone operators than I am. I stood beside him in his office at the Good Shepherd Church while he talked to all the wrong clerks and then to the right clerk, Ramy's mother. And then finally Reverend Overtask said, "Hello, Ramy Clark. There is someone here who needs to speak to you." And he handed the phone to me. And the very first thing Ramy said to me was that Archie was there with her. She said he showed up at the back door and yowled until they let him in, and he has stayed there. He hasn't left the house at all, and Ramy believed that I would show up again too. "When are you coming back?" said Ramy. "I had to tell her that you were gone, Granny, and that you were not my Granny to begin with, and that you had picked me up in an alley and that my parents were not the flying Elefantes, and that my real parents were unknown to me, and that I was not, after all, afraid of heights. I told her everything, and then I had to tell her I was staying in Georgia. "What do you mean, staying?" said Raymie. "I mean I am going to live here with the Allen family." "But what about us?" said Raymie. I started to cry then. The sun was shining into Reverend Obertask's office. It was lighting up his walrus whiskers in the perpetually joyous dust motes. And a long way in Florida, Raymie was crying too. I could hear her. Reverend Obertask cleared his throat. He said, "You know, people in Florida visit people in Georgia quite frequently." I took a deep breath. I said to Raymie, "You could come see me. All of you could come see me. I'm only one state away." They came to visit a week later. Mrs. Clark drove Raymie and Beverly and Buddy and Archie over the Florida-Georgia state line. She said that it was like being in charge of a traveling circus to have all of them in one car. But they came. And Burke Allen and Betty Allen and I have gone to visit Beverly and Raymie and Buddy in Florida. Archie, king of the cats, goes back and forth. Sometimes he stays with me, and sometimes he stays with Raymie, because he is a cat, and he does what he wants to do. Clarence the Crow is starting to trust me. He comes when I whistle. He has not yet landed upon my shoulder, but he will, Granny. He will. I have respected your wishes. I have not come searching for you, but I have crossed the Florida-Georgia state line many, many times since we last spoke, and I look for you every time I cross over. I know that you will not be there, but I look anyway, and I dream about you. In my dream, you are standing in front of the vending machine from the Goodnight Sleep Tight, and you are smiling at me, using all of your teeth. You say, "Select anything you want, darling. Provisions have been made. Provisions have been made." I am so happy when you show up in my dreams and say those words to me. Thank you for picking me up in the alley of the Louisiana Five and Dime. Thank you for teaching me how to sing. I don't know if you made it to Elf Ear or not, but I want you to know that there is no curse of sundering upon my head. I love you, Granny. I forgive you. The end.